Imagine a war that swept through nations like a thunderstorm, fast, loud, and unstoppable. Between 1939 and 1941, Adolf Hitler turned Europe upside down in just a matter of months. How did one man lead a country to such rapid dominance? The answer isn't just in the guns and tanks, it's in the fear, the silence, and the speed. Let's take a closer look at the story behind those early years of World War II, and why Hitler seemed so unstoppable at the start. Blitzkrieg, or lightning war, was the military tactic that gave Germany a powerful advantage in the early years of World War II. It was designed to bring a swift and overwhelming victory by using speed, surprise, and coordination. Unlike the slow trench-based warfare of World War I, Blitzkrieg depended on fast-moving armored divisions, aircraft, and motorized infantry working together. The goal was to break through enemy lines quickly, encircle opposing forces, and destroy them before they could regroup or mount an effective defense. German generals carefully planned attacks so that tanks would punch through the weakest parts of enemy defenses, while dive bombers targeted supply lines, communication centers, and command posts. This paralyzed enemy armies and governments, leaving them confused and unable to respond. The German military also used radio communication to coordinate between air and ground forces in real time, something many of their opponents lacked. When Germany invaded Poland in 1939, the Polish army, relying on older tactics and slower-moving units, couldn't keep up with the speed and intensity of the assault. France and Britain declared war, but Germany then turned the same method on Western Europe. In 1940, the Germans bypassed the heavily fortified French Maginot Line by invading through the Ardennes forest, a place the French thought tanks couldn't pass. Once again, speed and surprise worked in Germany's favor. The French army, caught off guard, collapsed in weeks. This pattern repeated itself in multiple early campaigns. The effectiveness of Blitzkrieg wasn't just in weapons, it was in strategy, timing, and the exploitation of the enemy's hesitation. It created fear and confusion, making resistance difficult. While other nations were still reacting, the Germans were already several steps ahead, reshaping the battlefield before their enemies had time to adjust. When Germany began its military campaigns in 1939, many of its opponents were not prepared for the kind of war that was coming. Countries like Poland, France, and even Britain had underestimated how quickly and effectively the German military would move. Poland, for instance, had a large army, but much of it was still reliant on cavalry and outdated equipment. Their communication systems were weak, and their defensive strategy was scattered, making it difficult to respond to the fast and coordinated German attacks. When Germany invaded Poland using Blitzkrieg tactics, the Polish forces were overwhelmed in just a few weeks. France, despite being one of Europe's major military powers, was also not ready for the kind of war Germany launched. They had invested heavily in static defenses like the Maginot Line, a long stretch of fortifications along the German border. However, the Germans avoided this line and attacked through Belgium and the Ardennes forest areas. The French thought were naturally secure. The French army was still using outdated strategies that had been effective in World War I, but they were not suited to fast-moving, mechanized warfare. Their tanks and air force were not used with the same coordination. As the Germans, Britain, though more modernized than some, had a relatively small army on the European continent at the beginning of the war. Known as the British Expeditionary Force, BEF, it was quickly pushed back by the advancing Germans. Many countries also lacked strong air defenses or modern communication systems, making it difficult to coordinate their troops effectively. This overall unpreparedness, combined with the shock of Germany's new tactics, meant that many of Hitler's early enemies were caught off guard. They struggled to react in time and found themselves quickly outmaneuvered and overpowered in the first stages of the conflict. One of the key reasons for Hitler's early success in World War II was his strategic use of political and diplomatic manipulation. Before launching full-scale military invasions, Hitler often secured agreements or used diplomacy to weaken his potential enemies and ensure Germany would not face immediate retaliation. A prime example of this was the Nazi-Soviet Pact, also known as the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, signed in August 1939. This non-aggression treaty between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union shocked the world, as both nations were ideologically opposed. However, the pact served both sides. Hitler avoided a two-front war, and Stalin gained time to strengthen the Soviet military and received territorial promises in Eastern Europe. Under this agreement, Germany and the Soviet Union secretly divided Eastern Europe into spheres of influence. When Germany invaded Poland from the west, the Soviet Union invaded from the east, effectively splitting the country. This move ensured that Poland would fall quickly, and that Germany wouldn't have to fight the powerful Soviet Union at least not yet. Hitler used similar tactics with other nations to buy time and secure resources. He signed treaties with countries like Italy and Japan to form the Axis powers and used threats and promises to keep smaller European nations neutral or compliant. Hitler also manipulated the political weaknesses of democracies like Britain and France. He took advantage of their desire to avoid another large-scale war, using promises and lies to delay their military response. By the time those countries fully committed to resisting him, Germany had already secured major victories. Through these diplomatic maneuvers, Hitler created temporary alliances and eliminated the threat of coordinated opposition. These actions allowed Germany to strike quickly and confidently, facing little immediate resistance and focusing its full military strength on one target at a time. The failure of appeasement played a major role in Hitler's early success during World War II. Appeasement was a policy followed mainly by Britain and France in the 1930s, where they allowed Hitler to violate the Treaty of Versailles and expand German power without facing serious consequences. The goal was to avoid another devastating war like World War I. Many leaders believed that by giving Hitler some of what he wanted, such as territory or political concessions, he would eventually be satisfied and stop making demands. However, this assumption turned out to be dangerously wrong. One of the first major examples of appeasement was when Hitler remilitarized the Rhineland in 1936, a direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles. France and Britain did nothing to stop him. Encouraged by their inaction, Hitler pushed further. In 1938, he demanded the Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large German-speaking population. Instead of standing up to him, Britain's Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain met with Hitler in Munich and agreed to give him the territory, claiming it would bring peace for our time. Czechoslovakia was not consulted in this decision. Hitler saw these actions not as signs of peace, but as signs of weakness. He believed that the Western powers would continue to back down. After taking the Sudetenland, he soon took the rest of Czechoslovakia, breaking his promises. Still, Britain and France took no military action. By the time Hitler invaded Poland in 1939, he had already gained valuable land, resources, and confidence through appeasement. These early gains allowed him to strengthen Germany's position without fighting. The delay in confronting him gave Germany time to prepare its military, test its tactics, and gain psychological advantages over its enemies who had already shown hesitation and fear in the face of aggression. Germany's early military success under Hitler was strongly supported by a process of rapid and extensive military modernization during the 1930s. After the humiliations of the Treaty of Versailles, which restricted Germany's army and banned many weapons, Hitler secretly began rebuilding and expanding the armed forces long before the war officially began. Once he came to power in 1933, Hitler made rearmament a national priority. Factories shifted toward producing modern tanks, aircraft, submarines, and other advanced weapons. Germany invested heavily in new technologies, including fast panzer tanks, Stuka dive bombers, and a well-organized, motorized infantry. Unlike the armies of World War I, which were often slow and dependent on horses, the new German army was designed to move quickly, strike hard, and overwhelm enemies through speed and coordination. The Luftwaffe, Germany's air force, became one of the most advanced in the world. With planes capable of delivering precise and terrifying attacks on both military and civilian targets. Meanwhile, the Navy began building powerful submarines. To disrupt enemy shipping and trade. Training was another key area of focus. German soldiers were drilled in new tactics that emphasized communication, flexibility, and combined arms operations where tanks, infantry, and aircraft worked together as one force. This training gave the German military an edge over opponents who still relied on older, more rigid methods of warfare. By the time war broke out in 1939, Germany had a modern, highly capable army that could outmatch most of its neighbors. Many of the countries Germany attacked were still using outdated equipment and had not modernized at the same pace. This imbalance allowed Germany to win quick victories, often before the enemy could properly respond. The early years of the war showed how effective this modernization effort had been in transforming Germany into a dominant military force. One of the often overlooked reasons for Hitler's early success in World War II was his tight control over German society and the powerful role of propaganda. From the moment he came to power, Hitler understood that winning battles wasn't just about weapons and soldiers, it was also about shaping the minds of people. Through state-run media, rallies, posters, radio broadcasts, and films, the Nazi regime built a narrative that portrayed Hitler as a visionary leader, Germany as a victim of past injustice, and war as a path to national greatness. Every message was carefully crafted to unite the German people behind a common cause and silence doubts or opposition. Propaganda emphasized themes of German strength, racial purity, and the need for revenge against those who had betrayed Germany. After World War I, it dehumanized enemies and glorified soldiers, creating a sense of pride and duty. Hitler's speeches were broadcast across the country, and newspapers printed only what the regime allowed. Schools taught children Nazi ideology, and organizations like the Hitler Youth prepared the younger generation to follow the Führer without question. Censorship ensured that dissenting opinions never reached the public. Those who criticized the regime or doubted the war effort were silenced through fear, imprisonment, or worse. As a result, the German population largely supported the war in its early stages, believing it to be just and necessary. Morale remained high, even when other nations condemned Germany's actions. This unity and belief in the Nazi message helped keep the home front stable, allowing Hitler to focus entirely on his military ambitions, without worrying about internal resistance. Propaganda helped build an image of unstoppable strength and destiny, making early victories seem not only possible, but inevitable in the eyes of many Germans, both in uniform and at home. The early years of World War II, from 1939 to 1941, tell a story not just of tanks and battles, but of how planning, manipulation, and fear can shape the fate of nations. Hitler's success in those first years was not accidental. It came through fast and brutal tactics, the weakness and hesitation of his enemies, clever diplomacy, modernized military strength, and a carefully controlled message that silenced doubt and fueled loyalty. These factors combined to give Germany a frightening momentum. But understanding how that success was built helps us see how dangerous unchecked power can become, and why standing up early before the storm grows is one of the most important lessons history can teach us.